Hi, Lyman. Okay, you ready? Okay, we're ready to start our meeting. Welcome everybody here to our work meeting today. Looks like we have two items on our agenda, the Pack Creek NRCS project discussion and public health goals and department discussion. So I assume you folks are here for the Pack Creek? Okay, so Tammy, are you gonna introduce this for us?
So we have Scott,
I don't
Who
think
is
your
the-
mic's on. Is it?
Yep.
Okay.
This mic is
Hold
on.
on, we'll turn it up.
My hearing aid isn't on.
Do I need to talk louder?
Maybe.
Okay. Quit using my soft inside voice. Use my.
Speak into it.
Test. Oh, much better.
Oh, yeah.
Ooh, that's way too loud.
I thought it was pretty good.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Very good. Okay. We ready? Okay. So we have Scott, who is the Pack Creek president now, and Adrian, I'm sorry, treasurer from the Pack Creek Water Company. And we're just,
Congratulations on your elections. You're now political.
so we're just going to discuss a little bit about Pack Creek and some of the history. I'm going to give you just a little bit of the history and where we're at and what we need to do to move forward. So pre-Pack Creek fire, which the fire was in 2021, the county applied for a BRIC grant, which is Building Resilient Infrastructure and Communities grant. This grant was to do floodplain mapping in the Spanish Valley area with SITLA. This project that the county applied for was not related in any way to the Pack Creek fire. It was just a grant that MAC applied for. Mm-hmm. In 2021, we had the Pack Creek fire, and it went through the whole community of Pack Creek. Down one side, the wind changed, turned it, sent it right back through the community the next day and up the mountain. The fire was big enough that they brought in a Type 2 team, which made it what they call an FMAG, which is a fire management. It enables it for a fire management assistant grant, which is the FMAG. So once it qualified as an FMAG fire, that enabled us to apply for FEMA funding through the Hazard Mitigation Grant Program. And that FEMA funding that opened up for us, it allowed us to do a big project like a debris basin, because we knew after a fire you get a lot of debris flow from the floods. So that HMGP grant we applied for, it's not an emergency watershed grant. It's just specific for the debris basin that we're putting at the cutoff road right there as you go into Pack Creek from the highway.
Did you turn in and
It's off of the highway.
Okay.
So right as you're coming down off the highway, there's a road that you can take the cutoff and it'll take you straight over.
yeah, and then it has a sign for the city you're going.
Yeah,
I've been
and
there twice.
yeah, so
One with Mac and one with my husband.
so that road has the creek in it,
We charge more for Minnesota land.
right? So that road is it has a natural basin to it, and we just figured we'd put a debris basin in there. And that project, we've been waiting for FEMA approval for that, and we finally got the approval in, I think, February it was. And so that project will start moving forward. At the same time that we applied for the Hazard Mitigation Grant funding, NRCS also came out, and there's a lot of acronyms, so I'm just going to give you the acronym. But NRCS is the Natural Resource Conservation Service, and they have an emergency watershed grant program, which we did that program as well. And this program is specific to the watershed within the community. It's not debris basins clear down at the cutoff road. It allows NRCS to come in and help us fix the watershed, protect infrastructure, and that's what we're working on. The issue with NRCS is they cannot do work on private property. They can't do a grant contract with private property owners. There has to be a sponsor for that project. And so what they've done is they've had the county be the sponsors, because we have some infrastructure in there as well that needs fixed. So county is the sponsor. As the county being the sponsor, NRCS can then go in and do some shoring up of the infrastructure on some of the private property within the creek. So for this to work, the county has to upfront all of the money for the project and then get reimbursed for the portion of the project that is on private property. So that's the NRCS. And then MAC applied for what is called the PIFR grant, which is
That's the fourth grant.
yeah, that's the fourth grant. Yep. He applied for a PIFR grant, and this grant is a preliminary investigation feasibility report. And this grant will take about 6 years. So he's applied for it. We're looking lost volume. Okay. We're looking at about 6 years before that grant comes to fruition. And this grant is with San Juan County, Sitla, Grand, and Moab City, and it's looking at the Spanish Valley area. It ties back into the very first grant, the BRIC grant, and looking at the floodplain issues there. So those two grants match with each other. So decisions that we have to make today, the commission needs to make. As indicated in the emails that you have gotten from the community would like the county to cover all of the cost of the project in Pack Creek without seeking reimbursement. So that would be our county interests as well as the private property owner's interest. This is not recommended by the staff, nor is there a precedence of this happening on other private property flood mitigation issues prior to this within the county. So funding private property owners' improvements in an effort to mitigate flood potential issues will create a precedence. If you fund this, we're going to have to fund the issues that were happening on the San Juan River up where they were having flooding issues there. We'll have to fund along the Bluff River. Anywhere there's flooding issues, we'll set a precedence if we do this. And just to point out, as flooding has taken place in communities through all of Utah this year, there have been no efforts to solve private property flooding issues. There have been efforts to provide sand and sandbags and help that way, but it has not been an effort to let's come in and shore up your yard. So just giving you that information. One option that we have also is to use road fund savings and upfront the cost for the improvements, which in turn will be reimbursed back to the county, and we can work directly with each one of the individual property owners and assign costs to them, which will then get reimbursed through a special tax assessment, which each property owner and owners of the area would pay for improvements pay for whatever NRCS does, and that will be individually. The other option that we have is the county can work with the water company, with Scott and Adrian and them, and have a reimbursement agreement that the water company will assign the cost to the water users throughout the area and then reimburse the county on those costs. And what they would do is they would do that increase through their billing mechanism. So that is what I have for you. Any
Hey,
questions?
Tammy, what's the total cost of the project? What kind of money is the county going to have to front?
So the total cost of the project is a little over $1 million. The whole cost for the county and landowners would be a little bit over $300,000. The two projects that are county designated, we're looking at our costs of $137,000 match, which would be the Desert Solitaire crossing and the Pat Creek Bridge right as you go into Pat Creek. They need to do some work on that. And then the rest of the costs are specific to the private property owners.
One question, I'm not saying that this is an absolute, but if we take $1 million out of county funds that we have in PTIF or wherever we have it, we're gonna jeopardize that interest income to fund this project. Are we taking that into account in any way?
Yes, and that's why I'm bringing it to you as a commission, because that is a decision that I cannot make.
So the total cost that the county would have to put into the project is roughly around 300,000.
Yes.
So it's not $1 million. That's so NRCS pays the 75%.
Yeah, it's 75-25 match.
And so we're looking right around 300. Where the county, so in my head I split it in half, 150 for the county projects, 150 for the private property projects. The county, you can use in-kind services for the county's match, and we've been tracking the road department as well as Tammy's time all throughout this. Once NRCS said yes, go ahead, you can track, we've started tracking that, and so all of the efforts that the road department and Tammy is making goes towards that $150,000 for county's portion of the match. Any efforts that the county road department makes on the road, and that's one of the things is, you know, TJ and his staff is like, well, we can put in the culvert, we can do all that work ourselves. Well, that goes to that 150 match. So I don't anticipate that we'll have to use a lot of the savings for that. The private property owner side of it, that 150 would have to come out of that PTIF savings. So you're roughly looking at that close to 150, depending.
And that would be paid back over time.
Yes.
no?
Yes.
That's
So
no different than what we did with the Spanish Valley Special Service District.
Okay.
When we helped kind of stand them up, we gave them kind of a loan where they had to reimburse over time those funds. And so if you're
So this won't set a
150
precedent for,
no,
okay, because we've done it before.
And-
it has been done before.
See, I was trying to charge you some interest.
So
and
I thought there was also the possibility of just doing it. I mean, the county doing it without being reimbursed. If taking that scenario, is this just a one-time thing, or
Yes.
is something that's going to set precedent for anybody that has problem to come to us?
well, if the county pays for the project in full and does not seek reimbursement from the community, then you will be setting a precedence. Anybody that has flood issues or damage to their property on this scale will be asking for commission assistance.
Do we have an empty purse?
Yes. And any in kind for the private property owners can also go to offset their projects. So there's some trees that the NRCS wants to utilize in some of the rock and roll structures, is what they call it, putting back the stream bed. There's a cost for those, and that can be used to offset the private property owner's cost as well. So rock, trees, things like that can offset that cost on that side. But I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think what you were asking is the $1 million we front up front and we lose the interest on that. And yes, we'll get that back, but we have to cover our match, which is the roughly 150. And so the decision is for you guys to make. Are we going to cover the other 150, or are we going to put that burden on the property owners?
I'd like to hear from the president and the treasurer of the company.
Awesome.
While we have a little break, some of our shareholders can't get access into the meeting. I don't know if there's a
Let's see here. And they have tried to sign in.
They've tried to sign in. They've tried
Okay.
to link. It says there's another meeting in progress.
Interesting. Because nobody is coming in on this side.
That might be it.
Let me.
It's on Facebook.
I don't think they can speak on Facebook. They have to be in the meeting to speak. They can view it on Facebook.
Okay.
But they're on the commission. Let me see if they're in here.
Thank you.
We'll see if we can find them. Okay, there they are.
Yeah, they're on the commission link.
Okay.
Yep, they're on the commission one.
Yep. Jackie. Yep.
Thanks for letting me know because I was wondering where everybody was at.
Thank you.
Literally,
Oh, there they
I
are.
was like, nobody's texted me and nobody's here, which is super unlike Colby and that. And so, can you guys hear us? Hey, Colby, are you there?
Yes, I am. Thank you, man.
Okay, perfect. Sorry about that
Thanks
on the room.
Helping us get that.
I've been waiting for text. I was surprised that there wasn't a Colby here in the other.
We record this
in the
anyway,
other
right?
meeting.
So in case they
It's
wanted to go-
recorded
Yeah,
on
so they
YouTube
can catch,
and
catch the first
Facebook.
portion that they might have missed. Great. Well, let me just say thank you all for your support with this project because we would have been in dire straits for protecting our water source and our infrastructure if it hadn't been for the support from the commission and all of the county officials. So it's been a really, really positive thing for us. I know some of those decisions were made before a couple of you were on the commission, but we appreciate that support. And we really see this as an incredible collaborative effort to try to get this done together with the county. And so we will be in close contact throughout this project to get it done. The primary concerns we have really right now is that our water source is in jeopardy with as much damage as we've had up there. Our water table is not real deep, and the potential for deeper wells up there is really tricky. So our primary concern is protecting our water source for the culinary water for all of the residents and shareholders up there. This project, under no fault of anybody here, has taken a long time to get off the ground, get planned, and started. And so as that has happened, we've had a lot of things that have changed, in terms of erosion and infrastructure damage, and we get closer and closer to losing our critical water source up there.
What is your water source? Is it a well?
Yeah,
Is
we
it
have
spring?
two shallow wells
Okay.
that go down to the top of the Manco Shale right now, and they're good right now. But as all the erosion has continued, we started to see some leakage out of that layer above the Manco Shale there, which is indicative that we might eventually, with continued erosion, start to lose that as a water source. We've looked at other sources, and we probably still will for a while, for deeper wells, but we'd have to go all the way down to the Glen Canyon group and maybe looking at 4 or 5 wells. And so that's our primary concern, is trying to protect that water source up there. As we've gone through the process and had some delays, we're starting to incur some more costs associated with keeping some of our infrastructure in place and incurring, costs that we probably wouldn't have had the project been started and gotten going a little earlier. All tricky. Had lots of flash floods and all that stuff, but it just kind of reemphasizes the point that we got to get on it and get it done, right? So we had a great discussion yesterday with Mac and Tammy about the intricacies and the challenges of the county, funding the entire portion of that, and that was very eye-opening, and we appreciate all that, and we're prepared to talk about some of those points with the rest of our shareholders as to why that's a challenge. We do still feel like it's an important piece of the entire watershed protection of Pat Creek there, even though it does rest on private property up there, most of that work. So we still hold our ask in place if you guys would consider that. It's not critical, but it is something that we feel is important to not just the people that are living up there, but to the whole health of the Pat Creek drainage as a whole. So anyway, that's where we stand. Other questions you guys might have for us related to our standing and what we've worked on and where we're at with the project?
Has there been sufficient reclamation done so that something in the future is not going to damage your system again?
Well, yeah, this project does reinforce, we have two lines. One of them is going to be reinforced. So it's a redundant line, right? So we have two lines. One of them goes under this precarious desert solitaire crossing. It right now is intact, and it supplies the water for almost the entire community right now. Well, it does for the entire community because the other one did get washed out last year. We're prepared to,
Above you on
yeah.
the forest.
Well, it's not on the forest. It's still on private property, but it's just upstream, probably a couple
So
of hundred
anything
yards.
on the forest won't affect your system? if
Well,
we
it
get a big
could.
rain
And the
or
Forest Service has been in the process of securing some grants to do a lot of watershed protection and work up there, similar to what we're doing with the EWP project. They've got another funding source, and they're starting to work on some of that. So that will clearly help. And they've been very diligent, and they've been just incredible partners with this too. So that work they're doing in combination with the work we're doing, we feel pretty confident that we would be able to protect our water source for a while. But yes, those two redundant lines, they're both on private property. One goes under the crossing, the other one got washed out last year. We're in the process of getting ready to repair that one upstream so that we can work with the NRCS to secure that one. That one hopefully would stay intact while we deal with whatever we're dealing with the bridge, because that's our main water line underneath
you
there
have
right
to
now.
Test that water, have the state test it or
Yep.
anything?
Once we replace that line, there'll be a period of testing in order for it to be deemed potable and
Okay.
for culinary water. It shouldn't be a long process. We're kind of doing a lot of things in conjunction so that we don't have a lot of downtime. Hopefully, keep everybody's fingers crossed, we wouldn't lose water for all of the residents there at any time, or for short periods, if anything. So.
And have you presented to your company the idea that they may have to have an assessment to pay back
We
your
have,
portion?
Okay. We've addressed that with our entire shareholders. We don't, with any community, probably don't have 100% support on that, but our water board, with the clear unanimous, if we're close to it, support, have the authority to do that, make those assessments. And we presented that,
Do you
to
have any
MAC.
idea of what that monthly charge or anything would be,
We,
an approximate or anything?
No, we don't really at this point, because we kind of wanted to just make sure that the county was comfortable with us doing that, and we are comfortable doing that as well. We would develop some type of assessment system that is equitable, but not necessarily equal, because everybody's up there and is in a different position. Some do have creekfront property, some use the bridge, some are just reliant on the water source. So we would have to develop that, and
Okay.
it wouldn't be necessarily equal for everybody, but it would be
Do
equitable.
you normally have a monthly water charge?
We have an annual water
An
charge.
annual?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
If you lived in Monticello, you'd have to pay based on your use, you'd pay a monthly charge.
Yeah. And ours is basically the same thing. We just conglomerate into an annual charge.
Annual payment.
Mhm.
You did answer my question. I was gonna ask if there's anything that you have worked out with the Forest Service or, up, I
Yeah.
guess whatever that fire costs, it created damage for you too. And so
Absolutely.
And I think there may be other resources besides our county to assist you with other projects. You mentioned that you're working with.
Yes, we are, and that their boundary of influence and ability to work is really kind of ends at the Forest Service boundary
Yeah.
for what they can do and the funding they get. But it is very proximal to us, and it is very much the same water table and source. So they've been very, very attentive to that.
And
Very
I
good.
don't know, home ownership, I mean, seems like there probably be some funds there where they can help you to fix some kind of infrastructure around the homes, whatever.
Yeah,
So maybe other combinations of resources.
yeah, that's true. And I want to just make sure that we emphasize that when this project first was developed, there was probably some thought out there that this was really kind of just everybody's homeowners damage that we're trying to fix. But over the course of time, through this erosion and cutting and everything else that's happened, we've realized this really is just a protection of our water source. That is the primary concern right now, and everybody has recognized that at this point, virtually. So it's changed a little bit in terms of our priorities of why we're trying to get it done a little bit.
This is not only remediation for your current problem, this is investment in the future for the community.
It
So
is.
It's presented that way,
Yeah.
because now you have the possibility it's going to happen with the water. But if it's not taken care of right now by the community, later on it will cost more and it'll be a lot bigger,
Yeah.
especially if the water dries out and you lose value in property. So
That's right.
to see
That's
it.
right. Yeah.
From all angles. But
Yeah. And Pat Creek is, you all know, it's a unique spot. It's one of the last kind of rural semi-agricultural areas in the northern part of the county that has a great history, and to have that community in jeopardy of loss of homes and potential vacation of properties up there would be sad for the landowners, but I think it'd be sad for the county too. So
as I see where the fire went, how blessed you guys were.
if it wasn't for
It's what-
if it wasn't for San Juan County and Grand County Fire, we would have had a disaster up there. It was bad as it was.
It was just
But,
a circle high wind and saved.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Mhm. So, what else can we answer for you?
Tammy, do we have I didn't see an item on the agenda to approve anything related to this. Are we just giving you a nod today to proceed?
Yes, the several of the options that we looked at, obviously, on the financial aspect of it is one requiring the private property owners to come up with the 150. It's what is that mechanism? There's two mechanisms that are in place. Where it's a special tax assessed area that you place on those property owners, and like you had mentioned in the presentation, is that equitable aspect is really a big concern, because there are private property owners that we would have to mitigate through that may or may not want this project to go forward on their property and have that special assessment. And that special assessment, what that does, it puts the amount on the individual properties, and then we collect that through the increase in property taxes, that assessed area. The alternative, which is what we're more in favor of itself, is kind of loaning the money to the water company and having the water company vet the public there, the community there. They'll be able to assess those fees more equitably than we can. They have a stronger relationship with their community than we do, and so we feel that that's the favorable. It's also, and one of the things that was touched on is the quickest.
Yeah.
We are going on to, I believe, year 3 now of this project, and like they say, so this is, and you've seen Pat Creek. as those floodwaters come through without these mitigation efforts in there, it just continues to get deeper and deeper or migrate one side to the other on the private property. And so, and that's where this water comes in jeopardy. The water line right now that is providing the main source of water to the community is, we feel it's about 5 feet below. That's kind of what Nate, their water operator for the company, has indicated, that they're about 5 feet below Desert Solitaire Road. And so you and I had crossed Desert Solitaire Road and gone on to the other side.
Yeah.
Now you can't cross that. There's daylight underneath that. And so the longer we take that watershed area, becomes deeper and deeper and deeper, and that's where the impact to that water line comes into play. You know, and this is one of the things that and Todd is on here as well, as time is of the essence, in so much that, you know, even our staff, we need to get in there and start working on it. We're worried about that water line just being 5 feet below that surface. We weren't even aware that there was a water line there. We don't have an easement in that road
People
for a
drive
water
over-
line.
used to drive over
No,
it.
so you can't even drive over that. But so we've got to go in and break that concrete up. And so we're worried that that water line is, say it's closer than that 5 feet, say it's 3 feet, and we're up there with equipment on that water line. And so we've got to hurry and go in and try to get that secondary water line in. But yet we're still waiting on engineering approvals. We don't have 90% drawings to go out to bid for the first phase. And so we're kind of all holding our breaths. Tammy has been awesome in trying to get NRCS to move quicker. NRCS, and you can imagine, in the last 2-3 years, all the flooding that's taken place in the state of Utah on public lands has applied for NRCS funds. Majority has received those funds, and so all these engineers are tapped out. They're down. Yesterday they mentioned 9 engineers, yet we continue to send them emails like once a month. Tammy is on it, and I know the water company's on it as well. It's like, hey, can we get the engineering? Can we get the engineering so we can go out to bid to get this in? Because, like it was mentioned, is the longer we continue to delay this and the longer we continue to wait, the higher the cost is. Yes. Yes, exactly. And so that stream bed has kind of migrated. We've been fortunate. I think there's been some nonprofit efforts through the Moab Watershed Agency. They've helped us with some of that mitigation along the stream beds, where they've come in and they've done the plantings and everything on there to try to help secure that. But yet there's a lot more that needs to take place in there. And I like the fact, and it's something that we need to be cognizant of throughout that whole entire area, and the utilization of the trees that was mentioned, is we feel that for years now we will continue to see an effect from that fire. And it's unfortunate that the Forest Service isn't more of a participant on this, is we will continue to have deadfall and trees that will come through that area. And so we need to make sure that as we go through, that we're trying to implore as much effort to try to mitigate those things, even if they're on private property, to try to get the deadfall out of there, which can kind of help towards that in-kind match.
Especially with this year where we have extra moisture coming from the Nina effect.
Mm-hmm.
The soils are already salt, and we'll be having then the monsoon area. hit.
Monsoon, yes.
So it is. very
Yeah, just
important.
looking at the crossing or the stream this spring and thinking we got to do some work in there, and looking at it like we're like 100 CFS at times.
Yeah.
This spring are like, whew, this is going to be daunting, but it has dropped, so that's a good sign right now.
Yeah.
The other last little thing I wanted to just and Mac hit on a little bit, but our infrastructure is certainly a major concern right now. But as it continues to cut down, we probably are going to start to see some effects of losing our water table. And so and that's really kind of part of the second phase of the project, which we don't even have drawings for yet. So that's the portion that really is kind of the protector of the water source. And this initial stuff is the protection of our water infrastructure. So any influence that you guys have on helping the NRCS, I don't know if you can or not, but trying to keep the pressure on them to get this done is going to be of awful importance to all of us up there. Yeah.
And if there are things that you
Yeah.
require from the water company in terms of easements from our shareholders, agreements, and I mean, like, we are ready to lean in and be partners with you to get this going, because we recognize not only the importance to our community and to our water source, but also the downstream impacts of waiting for this project to get in place.
I can see who the parliamentarian is of your company.
Well, she said the right word, being
She does all the arm
partner.
twisting, right?
Yeah.
I like when she said being partner is a good word.
Yeah, it feels really important to us.
Yeah.
We have
Yeah.
been so grateful and appreciative of San Juan County and Grand County and all the support that we've received since the fire, and it feels really valuable for us to maintain that kind of compatible partnership going forward in this. Like, we can only all stand to benefit from property values, taxes, etc. from this.
Jamie, you have any questions or comments?
I do, Commissioner. Thank you. So I'm trying to grasp this project. It's a project that I'm not familiar with, but on the premise of information shared today, what I've learned is the initiative is to improve the integrity of the existing watershed, and NRCS is involved in the project. The county has a requirement for a 25% match, and the numbers that I'm hearing is 300,000. And I think the county split that into 150 for the county and 150 for the private landowners. So the ask, if unclear, is the ask is for 150 from the county, right? Or is it 300 from the county? Or the entire match from the county? What is the ask? Give me the ask so that I can understand the ask clearly.
So the ask, it's a two-part ask. So automatically we've got county roads in there that the county has to pay for and fix, and we have the funds to do that. So that's the 150.
Okay.
And then the other one is the private ask. It's does the county upfront the 150,000 and then work with the water company or create a special assessment to recoup those funds back, because those are taxpayer funds that we would use for this project. And so, or what the community is asking for is the county to put 100% of that bill, all taxpayers pay for the private property improvements of Pack Creek for the water company without any reimbursement back. So those are kind of the asks in summary.
I think that's correct.
The kind of our next steps along with those lines is we will bring back in the easement agreement. So each property that has a structure or an improvement placed on there, we will have to have an easement, a right-of-way access easement to those properties so the contractor can do the work on those properties. And so you'll see those come back to you. If you choose to enter into a participation agreement where the water company charges the users and then pays the county back through a reimbursement, I would bring that reimbursement agreement back to you so that you can approve that reimbursement agreement with the water company. And that's really what we've done in the past, like with Spanish Valley Special Service District, is we lent them the money and then they paid it back throughout time back to the county. And so that's kind of what we looked at. We would have the request for proposal that would be submitted, and you would see notice of award, county contract that would also be approved through the commission. And so this is kind of the start of it. And this is what was critical for us, is to find out, are you okay with just the reimbursement, or literally do you just want to fund it ourselves? Or all of the taxpayers pay for Pack Creek's improvements. Kind of gives us direction on how to set the ball rolling forward.
So in a sense, are we committing funds today?
I'm sorry. say
Are
that
are we committing funds today then?
No, it's more of how do we structure the documents, and so
Okay.
no matter what, we would upfront the money, the 300,000. So there is already that commitment. We committed that back when we accepted the grant, the awards,
That's been
3 years ago, and we're still waiting.
The funds have
And
been
so we've kind of
3 years
committed
ago.
to that. It's just how do we get that money back?
I see. Okay. So
Because
I'm,
if we don't get the money back, then anybody have flood problems, they would come after us to.
so really there's only two decisions to make on how we want the money to come back. We front it ourselves and collect it directly, or we go through
The water company.
the water company and they do the assessment and do the collection.
And I
Okay.
think we could actually have Tammy and Mac work out those details. I think if we don't ask them to pay back the 150, we're setting a precedent that that'll impact the county funds
Forever.
in the future. So
All right. Yeah, I'm back on the wagon. I get you. I caught the net. Thank you very much.
well, we don't want you to get bucked off the horse. So I think the message to you today is that we'll move forward as a county to help any way you can, but I think you're going to have to pay back the 150, and you can work out those details with Mac and Tammy, and once those details have been worked out, they'll bring it back for final approval,
Understood.
if that's okay.
Anything else, Adrian?
My only curiosity is because of the delay of the project, the water company is now looking at spending a lot of our own dollars to fix infrastructure that has been broken or damaged since the project should have started. And so is there some consideration that could be made by the county for those expenses? Like if this project were to have started when it was supposed to have started, we wouldn't have incurred those costs.
I think that would be a hard.
Well, I don't think the county was causing the delay. I think it was more the NRCS and the whole system, how it works. I guess one thing that we could say is we're going to front you this money for over a long period of time and not charge you any interest on it. So, so maybe that's the trade.
No. The stars have not aligned on
They
this
haven't.
project.
It's been a tricky-
When
it's been a
I mean,
really
it's
tricky thing.
it's natural and it's just kind of common, and you'll learn this as well as storms follow the fire, and so you typically after the fire you'll have storms that'll come through, and then you have this debris and everything that washes down. But then last year was an abnormal year where we received so much flood water that came down through that system that really nobody could have anticipated. So even though you have the fire and the rains from the fire, but you also had this abnormal year of flash flooding that took place in this area. And some of the flash flooding that took place was literally a single cloud type thing that just dropped everything, and that flooded out into Grand County, and you'll see
Yeah, it was on
some
Main
of our
Street. in Moab, I
yes,
think.
exactly.
It was messy.
And it was just one of those things that even NRCS, and I think to NRCS's credit, every time we've had these storms come through and these flash floods, they've been back up there to reassess what do they need to do to re-engineer. And so there's been multiple reiterations on their part to as they've seen these floods come through and how it affects the whole entire system. They've been able to kind of shift their emphasis in design to help mitigate, but it's just 3 years is a long time.
Mac, do they have their own in-house engineers?
They do, and
Not a
that's
possibility to go out and
even
do an
to
RFP for an engineer.
they looked at that. They have so many projects that they've even outsourced a lot of their engineering. They're down 9 engineers, and they cannot get them once they hire one. Once they make an offer, just an offer, somebody else is stealing them. There's just so much work out there going on. It's hard for them to keep an
Need to go to
engineer.
college again and to engineer.
I know that.
Brittany, do you know any engineers?
Yeah, Brittany.
No, we're great about that.
One special one, huh? Yes.
Okay, I think we're ready to move forward and try and make everything work for you.
Yeah, we appreciate that a bunch, and we just wanted to emphasize how much we appreciate the support and the
We're sorry about the delay, but I really don't think it was our fault.
No, I don't think so, it was either. But the things we can control now, we can control
Yeah.
now, right?
Try to control as fast as we can.
Yep. Okay.
All right.
Thanks for coming.
Yeah, thanks for
Good
your
luck
time.
and talking to your
Yeah,
neighbors.
come visit. We love having visitors.
Do you have any more questions for
No.
me? Thank you.
Good. Thanks, Tammy, for your
Thank
work on it.
you.
You and Mac, both. We need to all rise. Mr. Neves is in the building, you know.
Yes, it's Che.
That's what I do every morning when
Yeah,
I see
I
him.
know. You got to give him his props, you know.
That's right. That's right. You might not come back again, right?
He's all right.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Let's get logged in here.
Okay, Grant, you've got about 60 or so slides. That's a slide a minute. So good luck trying to get through all this. You may want to summarize it.
Right.
Do you want this? If you
Is it
do
do a little practice here? And then if I want to go back, I go like this. Is that right?
you should be able to use the
Hold left
ball,
over.
the tracking ball.
Oh, nice.
There you go.
Thanks for the orientation. Good morning, everyone. Sorry for the intimidating number of slides. Part of the here, I'll show the outline here. I did include our annual report here. That's the reason for the length, and there's not necessarily a need to go through every part of that. It's more for your reference, and we'll be submitting that in a more formal matter in the near future. But it's a real honor to be here. As with any time, this is a rather complex topic because public health is complex, but also what we're talking about today is the opportunities to tailor and sustain our local approach. A big part of that is the local funding for our public health department, and that's a foundation for everything we do. So to get there, I did want to share a little bit of background, more of a comprehensive sense of what is public health, what does it look like in our county, and then hopefully that helps provide context for us to discuss some of this tailoring, as well as how do we sustain this increase in local public health funding. So we have an updated mission statement to share with you here. Our purpose is to protect and promote the health of all families and communities we serve. Such a diverse county, including rural, tribal, underserved, everyone. And we have this combination of compassionate support, education, connecting to resources, creative partnerships, healthy environments, and preventing disease and injury. All this combines together, and we have these core values on the right that help guide us, and we're always coming back to this, and it came from our board members and our staff members in terms of putting this together based on how we work with communities. So you can see we're always trying to engage with communities. I'll show some examples of that. Part of the foundation of our core values is this sense of partnership and empathy, both internal as a department. How can we partner better together? And how can we empathize with each other? And that then creates a sense of trust that then the community, we hope, can sense from us as we partner with the community, as we empathize with the community, as a team. And so we do a survey, we do immunization drive. Hopefully people can sense like, oh, this is for me. They feel that empathy. It's not just some random survey that's not meant for them, etc. So that's a partnership there. Another part I'd like to highlight is prevention. We partner with San Juan Counseling, the San Juan County Prevention Action Coalition, for example, right? So we talk about this word prevention, partner with Tammy in terms of, how do we prepare for an emergency so that we prevent the unintended, like the preventable impact of an emergency. And so we break it down into 3 levels: first, second, and third here. So for a disease, the obvious one is COVID. We were more trying to be on that first and second level, prevent it in the first place, and if someone does get it, catch it early through early testing, and then later we were able to get some treatment. And so we're able to say, okay, get the treatment early before you get too sick. On that third level is something we're not as involved with. That's more on the healthcare side. So in the case of COVID, it's like long COVID. How do you manage that? That's more on the healthcare side. And so we apply that to any disease or injury and say, how do we go upstream? And we had our 3 early birds, is the way we talked about it in our county in terms of early prevention, early testing, early treatment. But we look at that, use that same approach across anything, car vehicle accidents and deaths, right? And how do we as public health identify and address any gaps in the system, gaps in the community, and address those upstream factors. If cars are coming off a cliff in a certain spot, the third level is like, oh, let's get that emergency response team down there quick, right? But for us, we're like, oh, is there a guardrail? Is there some lines we can put? Is there, expanding the road? Or is it even improving the skills of the drivers? Is there someone driving under the influence? Is it seat belts? Sometimes a seatbelt doesn't help if you're going off a cliff, but it actually, no, sorry, I'm going on a tangent here. But what it is here is like just thinking about all those factors upstream, right? So we're trying to think creatively with our partners to really work across those sectors and disciplines to do that. Oh, sorry.
It's not you. Go ahead. Continue.
Okay, I was just going to progress.
Lyman is.
Yep.
Brittany was on there. We were trying to let her in.
Great.
So she might have.
Yeah, I share an example of diabetes here. Reducing severe complications is more on the healthcare side, but we're trying to prevent those complications or even prevent diabetes in the first place. And so, go ahead. Got it? There we go. And so another way to look at it is across different levels of our community. So there's the individual factors on the left here. What can an individual do? How do we honor the choices and thoughts and decisions of an individual and empower them to make the healthiest choices possible, and really understanding them? How do we also work with on the interpersonal level, families, social networks, and then, like we're also saying, partners, organizations, schools, churches, chapter houses, etc. And then larger than that, community, how those all work together. And then, of course, here we are together talking about policy, laws, and of course, in our county, working across nations too. And this is a personalized approach to try and show what does public health look like in our county. Some of our board members went to a symposium. We tried to show like, oh, what is public health? How do we approach public health? And we talked about this connection from every direction. We have a North Star here, and you might not be able to read it, but these were some key things from our mission statement and our core values here that are pointing us to our North Star. But then also we have the 4 directions that help guide us. As I've been learning about the beauty way of life, and from the east, as the sun is rising, it's a chance to think, to ponder about what our resources are. To the south, as we head into the morning, is a chance to plan and organize ourselves, set some goals. To the west, we act. And then to the north, as the sun sets, we evaluate, we assess, how did we do? And we continue that cycle, even across a year, throughout the seasons. And so that's helped us. Here it overlaps with what's called the community action cycle. And this is something I've used throughout my career in public health to organize together with the community, explore together, plan together, act and evaluate together. And I've been very touched to see that resonating so much locally with local thoughts about how do you go through this process. And for us, it helps us restore balance. And I'll share how that's really been important with COVID, given such a heavy impact of COVID, and how do we also learn from that and move forward together. I'd like to share a little background on the public health code in Utah. This is what's called the minimum performance standards for public health. So what does the state define as core public health? And this has, sorry about the extra wording here, but I tried to highlight a few key things here. So things that the state defines as necessary or desirable for the protection of public health. On the right here, you can see basic public health services, administration, maternal child health, disease control and epidemiology, food protection, a variety of environmental health factors like we've been discussing today with Pack Creek. And then I'll keep moving here. So if a health department is organized, and we are the newest health department in Utah, also covering the smallest number of people, but also the largest geographic area for a single county, as you know. So to create a local health department fund, and it says to put this in a restricted account, and that this fund be used through a certification process of the health officer or a designee. Another part of this minimum performance standards definition here is if we are to create a local health department, as we have, to ensure that we have the revenue in the county budget for that health department to begin operations and to sustain those. And it highlights a few core positions here. Employ the following full-time employees: health officer, registered nurse, environmental health scientist, business manager. We also have some part-time things that are listed here. Physician oversight. I'll show our org chart with Dr. Nielsen there. We have health education, epidemiology, et cetera from there. And then also that infrastructure to support the health department as a whole. So that's kind of this overarching background, not as specific to our county per se. Any questions so far? Mostly just refresher here. Let's see. So this is the structure of our annual report here. And like I said, I'll just touch on a few things here and something you can refer back to. The main context here is that in 2022, we were still, we had the Omicron wave of COVID, a lot of illness, but we were not sure of the impact at the beginning. Was it going to have a wave of severe illness and death as we'd seen previously? We weren't sure, so we were doing our best to assess that and be as prepared as we could. But gradually we started to realize that we were not seeing as much severe illness and disease. So it was a chance for us to reflect and to kind of check on ourselves as a health department to see how we were doing and to see if we could sustain our efforts. And it was also a chance to honor those who had passed and all the suffering that had happened. So that was a really important process for us to go through as a health department. And part of that was this, like I said, the community action cycle in these 4 directions really helped us. And this is where I already mentioned before, this chance to organize, plan, act, and evaluate together. And that helps us really, like I said, restore balance. And that's where I shift here. How can we really deepen our local, strategic, and sustainable public health approach that's unique to our county? Some broad goals that we set together was to increase access to services across our county, improve our partnerships, strategically align and utilize our existing and potentially new funding, and then build our capacity to move forward. And again, like I said, look at health in a very comprehensive way. And with the overarching vision of having greater balance, compassion, and healing. And I'll mention that healing is something that I have, throughout my career in public health, I've rarely heard that word used. And from my experience, though, in working with our community and communities similar to ours, it's so important that we don't just say prevent, 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 but we also reflect and say, what can we learn from the past? How do we heal from any divisions that have been there and move forward together in that sense of healing? And it actually helps us better prevent, because then we've kind of processed that. We've restored balance, both internally and as a community. So this is small here, but I share our updated organizational chart, trying to see if it's up to date here. And so this is in a draft form, but trying to emphasize that ultimately we report to our communities and our citizens. Thanks to you all as leadership, as commission and administration. And we rely, I've tried to highlight some of the core things we rely on as part of the county in terms of human resources, IT, maintenance, custodial. We also have, one of our strengths is our board of health. Sorry about the small type here, but we do have, part of our bylaws is having a really great mix of people from across our county, Blanding, Monticello, our commission represented, White Mesa, thanks Commissioner Harvey, Monument Valley, Bluff, Lois Young was able to attend today, Sylvia Joni from Montezuma Creek, Aneth area as well. And so that's really a core part of our community engagement, to have that consistent oversight from them. So like I mentioned, medical director, Dr. Nielsen, that is a part-time role there. Our division directors across with, like I said, like was mentioned in the minimum performance standards, business manager. Thanks to Tyler for being here. Ronnie as well, environmental health director, emergency response coordinator and operations manager. Our health promotion director, Rebecca Benali, nursing director, and Brittany Carlson, and then on down through our staff. And you can see a good mix of people here in terms of public health nurses and under health education. Epidemiology reports directly to me, but there's a lot, I put a dotted line here, a lot of coordination with our nurses through disease investigation. And then our Tyler's also supervising our front desk and our community marketing. And we have a few here that if you don't see a name, that's one where we're trying to post that and recruit for those positions, such as our cancer marketing position. And also we have a couple asterisks here, replacement. We do have one public health nurse who's retiring, and we like I said last time I presented with the cancer screening program, the plan there is we have some funding to help with that transition. It's the crisis public health workforce funding that can help us pay for that person until that retirement happens. And then we'll be back to our 3 core public health nurses under our director. Any questions, clarifications about our organization? A lot of information here.
Question I'd have, you know, before we built that nice big building in Blanding, we used to have an office here in the courthouse, especially to deal with WIC and, and some of the immunizations and things like that. Have we discontinued reaching out to the other communities outside of Blanding with those programs? Great question. I do have that listed here, and it might take a little bit of scrolling. If you'd like, I could. Well, I'll just tell the quick answer is, as we did retract because of COVID, but now we're in a better place where we're like, okay, let's expand. So I have 2 specific goals around that. And we have a phased approach. First proposed phase is to come back to Monticello once a month, and then about 3 months of getting that going, 3 months assess, and then the next 3 months, our tentative plan is Monument Valley, as we've kind of tried to say, okay, what would help the most? And it's tricky because there's a lot of need and a lot of ways that, like, oh, where could we be, right? But that's our current plan. Again, get that going, assess, and then get another one going and assess. So I'll show you a little more detail in a minute. I'm glad you asked, though, Commissioner. It's appropriate. So we have this here, an overview, high-level overview of our revenue and expenditures for last year. A few highlights here. We have most of our funding is what we call intergovernmental grant revenue, approximately 50 state and federal grants. We are always trying to advocate with our grant liaisons to say, be mindful of the reporting. We want to be accountable, but we also want to make sure it's manageable because we are reporting across around 50 grants. And so that we want to be doing work and not just reporting on things, right? Let's see. So part of our county contribution is here, this transfer to other entities. I have a more detailed presentation about this in a few slides. This portion here is to San Juan Counseling for their Medicaid match.
And I have a few more slides later about administrative costs. This was higher at 30%, but because of the state increase last year in investment in local public health, we were able to bring it down to 21%. And I'll show you plans to drop that even further. Otherwise, you can see this mix of how the funding goes to the variety of our different divisions.
So I have a question. So this total does include all the grants that you have too, or is just
On the top?
So this is
Okay.
all last year, right?
Yeah, this is
isn't
2022.
all last
So
year?
why didn't you include the 2023 totals on there? Because those look a whole lot different. with
Right. I do have
administrative
some
costs.
slides. Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Right. Thanks.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm in the. Yeah,
Awesome.
this is
No,
a
you're
2022
fine. This is-
report.
So it's 10:07, just so you're aware.
Okay.
All right.
Got it.
Also,
Yep.
you did. I was trying to read what you were talking about the reporting part.
Yeah.
I
Yes.
have written grants and I have implemented other people's grant.
Mm-hmm.
And implementing other people's grant, in order to get a grant, sometimes we have the people that are writing the grant do lots of promises, lots in order to earn points, and then the person that implement the grant, then we had to make it work and fit.
Right.
And one things with grant that's important is the reporting. Like I heard you say something reporting, and so these grants distribute through the whole gamut of your program, and so they're not all
Mostly.
into, let's say, you having to report and have to do. So each department get those grants, and each program is
Reporting
is
themselves, for
responsible
example.
for the reports. And also another question I have is when we do contracts, and those are the things that we I have worked with federal grants where we have people from Washington come and they question us, and it's really tense when you come and they start making sure that we're meeting the objectives and
Right.
goals and
Like a site visit, et cetera.
yeah.
How are you
Anyway,
doing?
so I was kind of curious how the process
Right.
was, if it was just one person overseeing all the grants or each department.
Great
Anyway.
question. Yeah, we have our division directors directly doing the reporting overall, and I'm available for support. Tyler is helping with the financial side of those reports.
Okay.
But as far as like what activities happened, what outcomes we had, it is pretty much entirely the division directors that
Okay.
are doing those reports. So health promotion and nursing are ones where they have a lot of funding sources. Environmental health, you have a few, not as many as theirs, but he does cover a lot of topics within those. So it's kind of an interesting mix, a lot of different styles in the reporting as well. So we're always trying to adapt there. Or always trying to, shift gears. Okay, which one are we reporting on now? What are they wanting to hear about, right?
Yeah.
So,
Well, thank you. I just wanted
yeah,
to
it's a
say
good
that.
question. Good. Yeah, and a part of that is actually fully utilizing and also appropriately utilizing that funding.
And I want to make one more comment about grants. I used to manage 3 different programs at the college, so I had different grants. I got to a point that when you have too many,
Yep.
that we are not benefiting ourselves.
Exactly.
And so, the balance, finding that balance, because when I started writing grants, I had lots of grant proposal requests and things like that. So I see lots of
Right.
wonderful grants, especially we'll see this later on today that you're involved with. And so
That's where we're at right
it's
now.
always the balancing act
Yep.
between the,
We need that foundation to better serve our current grants, but because we have opportunities that come up all the time. People, in some ways, in a good way, people are interested in supporting San Juan County,
yeah.
but at our current capacity, we can't accept
Yeah, and
additional
sometimes we had
grants.
to be selective because
Yep.
there's only so much time.
Exactly, based on our current staff
Yeah,
capacity.
because after a while you're not making any if you,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, we're spread too thin across too many grants, and so
Yeah.
that's where we're at right now. Is trying to do our best with our current And that's where this foundation has really, the improvement, the increase in local and state funding has really helped us. We're like, okay, we
Because
have that.
you build the program.
Yeah, then we can actually
Yeah.
say, okay, how are we doing with these programs, and not just be in survival mode all the time.
Yeah.
A highlight I'll share, this has just some example data, not example, but in the full report, you can see the details of some of the data we're tracking. This is state level data that's broken down by county. And this is one way that we assess how the county is doing. But part of what I put here is that we have to use a grain of salt here and say, what's the quality of this data? Does it really represent our county? And that's the next phase we want to go into, is really have confidence in our data so that we know how our community's doing, and then we can actually implement programs that are truly tailored to the need as well as the strengths of our communities. Because, for example, diabetes as an underlying cause of death, similar to Utah, even though, if I look at the next slide, adults with diabetes twice as high as far as what people report. There seems to be a disconnect there, and that's something I'd want to work with our epidemiologist and our partners to say, oh, what's really happening? Let's paint a clearer picture so that we can work on this together. So I'll keep going since, like I said, pardon for skipping slides here, but we've been working through this process with our epidemiologists and our partners to do community surveys. This was our first run at it with our current organization. 150 respondents. It was one way to say, hey, from a community perspective, what health priorities do you see? Overarching theme we see here and in the community health needs assessment with the hospital is mental health, keeps coming up. And that's part of my background and expertise, is how mental health impacts physical health and goes back and forth between them. Pardon for skipping a little bit here. I'm going to go through these. Just highlighting here our partnership with Blue Mountain. We're both required to do a community health needs assessment, but through this support from the state, we're able to link and work together on that. And you can see an overlap here with mental health being a top issue that came up in a stakeholder meeting. So other things we're doing, disease investigations. This is non-COVID, all the various reportable illnesses that we're tracking. Long list, just let you look at that for a minute here, sorry. COVID, here's an overview of the pandemic. That first year is, I'll highlight here, just 37 might not seem like a lot. For our county, when you look at it by population size, the rate, it's twice as high as the rest of the state as far as COVID deaths across the duration of the pandemic. And that's what I was talking about early on in the presentation, is that we did see this decline in the severity over time. That combination of immunization rollout, partnerships with our healthcare partners to make that happen, as well as our own immunization efforts, and just other combined efforts to help improve the overall situation. And so that's why we're in a better place now moving forward. We see that COVID comes up as number 3 for leading cause of death in our county here, tied with unintentional injuries. So we also cover vital records, tracking deaths and births. I'll just mention that here and keep moving. We have our environmental health that covers the clean water, air, soil, a lot of different components here, wastewater systems, etc. So similar to what was talked about today with Pat Creek. Food service as well, restaurants, pools, etc. Nursing, we have a variety of home visiting program through our public health nurses, community breastfeeding promotion efforts. They partner, like I said, with disease investigation, our children with special health care needs, a lot of families impacted by intellectual disabilities there, women, infants, and children's program, like we talked about earlier, definite need to expand the access to that. But we also looked at some system levels issues by interviewing potential mothers, potential WIC participants. They qualify, but they don't enroll, and that's led to some policy changes that are underway. We also have health promotion, things like tobacco compliance checks with our vendors that sell tobacco, car seats, a lot of outreach happening, and I'll share a few highlights here. It's around food access, community mapping with our communities. Thanks to the commissioners and MAC for attending quite a few of those sessions. That's been a partnered effort. And also highlight community health workers as a long-standing approach. Navajo Nation has had community health representatives, and these are people who have a existing trusted relationship in a so-called underserved community, some group where it's like, hey, how do we work together, right? And they have that innate cultural knowledge, something that you can't learn from a book. So that's where it differs from a health educator. Health educator comes and has that book knowledge, that science knowledge, but needs to outreach to the community to build those relationships. So a community health worker can come this way and a health educator can come this way and really be a strong partnership. And that's been something that our team has helped promote through a new certification process that the state has sponsored. Emergency preparedness, like I said earlier, we've been in an active emergency. COVID has been that, and it just officially ended as a designation as an emergency. But we're moving forward now, and one of our goals is to have a tabletop exercise to get us ready for the fall radiological response exercise that Tammy is planning. So we'll be a part of that. Like I said, here's the goals and objectives. Thanks for letting me speak a little bit earlier on this. Expand locations. Our current draft form of this is, like I said, Monticello for the first level of expansion, then potentially Monument Valley. Part of our assessment of our costs, environmental health, we've only received so much from the state, and that has not covered costs in the past. That's one reason when we've been in a deficit. So I'm working with the state to see if they can increase their contribution for environmental health, because it's just not matching the need Ronnie has to drive across the whole county and do all this. We're also going to evaluate the wastewater fees to see how that looks compared with comparable counties in terms of demographics, be it income as well as rurality, how spread out we are. There's potential for a tiered approach to restaurant inspections. If a restaurant has just really high marks, we can actually say, okay, we're going to go a little bit longer without inspecting. If we hear about something, Ronnie will be there right away to check out any concerns. But then if a restaurant has a lower score, it's like, okay, I'm going to come back a little bit more often. And so that can help maybe mitigate the cost a little bit while still maintaining that high quality in our restaurants. That's something we're evaluating right now, as maybe a chance to be more efficient, and with the cost related there. There's also, we just had a meeting yesterday about data management, because Ronnie receives a lot of requests for records about wastewater systems. A home has been bought, sold, and they're trying to get the record, and they don't always know what name it was originally the wastewater inspection was conducted under. And so Ronnie's like trying to find, it's all paper records. And so there's potential there with some other funding actually to improve that, and that could improve the use of his time with those record requests. So that's something we're working on there. You can see some other partnership expansion things. I've talked about public health infrastructure as a 5-year grant that we have to help improve our internal and external infrastructure for public health. Community health needs assessment, already talked about that, as well as how can we better utilize our existing and potential funding. So, and this other part here, staff meetings, we actually struggled to have staff meetings because we didn't know how to pay for it. Because a staff meeting is general. All of our funding is siloed up until last year. I say all, essentially all. And so if we had a meeting, it really had to be focused on opioid or tobacco or something. But to have a broad staff meeting was actually challenging. And so that's been a shift for us to be like, okay, we actually have some core funding for us to meet together and talk about internal collaboration, team building, things like that, policies, etc. So that's been a big change for us. So now, how do we tailor our, sustain this local funding? So I'll share a little background and we can dive into the discussion. So background is, like I said, about the 50 federal grants, state and federal grants that we have, and being a newer health department, we just need to work through some of these details. Let me just jump here to some history. Here, we talked with Southeast Utah Health Department about what amount was received before, just to get as much records as we could. And we also have here transfers to counseling in the past. So this is up until the break off when our health department was created in 2015. That's as best as we understand. That's why this is a little lower that year. It was like prorated, so we split mid-year, and so the funding only met up to that amount for Southeast when we branched off on our own. So that's the history. More recent history, since we began, you can see here how much was transferred to San Juan Counseling, the original amount in the health fund year by year, remaining in the public health fund. But then, Mac, as we've talked about before, there's this transfer from the general fund to public health as well. When I've looked into this as best I can based on paperwork, my understanding is the core issue here was that when we were first established, we didn't have reimbursement set up properly from the state. All of those state and federal grants, they are reimbursement based. So we implement activities, submit for reimbursement, they pay us for those costs. And again, this was a while ago, but as far as I could tell, and working with Tyler on this, that was a core issue. The reimbursement process was not set up, and sadly, it was a major issue. And I think that's what led to these big transfers from the county. You can see year by year how the amount that is available to public health does vary after that from 2018 to 2022, including a negative number here in 2019. So that's an opportunity there in and of itself. When we look at the Truth in Taxation form, it says health fund. And so there's potential there where can we create some separation there so that San Juan Counseling has their funding, which we fully support, right? We need to work with them, with the coalition and in other ways, like we said, mental health being a priority, and knowing how much we have available for public health each year. So that's one place where we could pause for a minute to discuss that. And I do think, Lyman, we were checking a lot of these numbers together. Thanks for working with Tyler on this.
I have a question. So if you have a balance from the previous year, it rolls to the next year, to the coming year, if you have a balance in your
I think we would,
budget?
yeah. From our local fund.
These numbers are just what is available for us to use, though. So, like, ideally, we're using that amount for our activities for the community.
Okay, but if in the end of the year you have a balance that rolls to the next year, okay.
There's always a challenge with their fund, and you'll see this kind of anytime you have participation with state grants. Their state fiscal year is a June to July. County is a calendar year, and so oftentimes they'll be half spent on a state grant, and we will close out the year on the calendar year, and they'll still have funds remaining on the contract that exist for another 6 months that are kind of offset for that next year. So funds do carry over from year to year on those.
Yeah, it is something we want to make sure there's enough that we're also saving along the way in case something,
For a rainy day.
something, yes, a rainy day, right? So it's a thing where we don't know, right? And that's why we were able to look at the flooding issues. Something might happen, right? And so that's where we're trying to get to a better place so that, hey, there's more of that assurance. If something happens, we have that rainy day funding available. Like I said, I was just pausing on this just because of that. The current structure of San Juan Counseling using the health fund, and then, so if there was a separation there, I think it would help. So that each of us, so that we would know, okay, what's available for public health each year.
How would you propose a separation?
I'm not sure. That I would defer to our financial team for that, so that there's a restricted account for public health, like state code.
So this was set up. The taxing entity itself was set up specifically to house public health and San Juan Counseling together. Even state code allows you to actually combine local health authorities into one. We've considered that in the past. I've never really heard actually separating into a different tax entity with San Juan Counseling.
Mhm.
So you'd have and I don't know if you could separate that out.
So how would we have a restricted account for public health? The
How would
state
you-
code requires.
It's all the same. So the restricted account is the tax,
Yeah.
specific to what, Fund 72? What fund is it that you're in?
Our number 25.
45?
25.
25. So Fund 25 is its own taxing entity. It receives its own restricted funds into that, of which we allocate a portion of that fund into San Juan Counseling. So it's all within that restricted fund.
Mhm.
And so when you look at taxing entity, and it's the same with the library fund, you can transfer out into other funds. You cannot commingle. And so we transfer out of the public health district funds, that portion to San Juan Counseling. So you're both intertwined in one. And that's why you see on your budget a transfer to other units.
Mhm.
That's specifically why that is there.
Let's see. And so it does sound like it's, to me, it sounds like it's in conflict with the state code that says that there needs to be a restricted account with, sorry about
The
scrolling.
treasurer, the county treasurer.
Is that the designee?
It
then in
is
our
a
case?
yep. It is a restricted account that only your funds can be spent within your funds,
Mhm.
and so that's where you see charges for maintenance, charges for human services, charges for IS directly to your account.
So let's see. So maybe we could improve by having a certification process so that I'm aware.
It's
of-
certified every year by our independent auditor.
Well, just referencing this line here. So claims to the fund need to be certified by the health officer or a designee by the health officer.
Of the local health department.
Yeah.
I'd have to look at that and see.
I mean, this is some conversations we've had too as well, Lyman. Because part of the challenge is we don't know each year how much is available to public health because we're not sure how much San Juan Counseling is going to request unless we ask them, which has been our process since we realized this was happening.
Yeah. Okay. So the commissioners are the only ones that can allocate a tax. And so I don't understand what this certification, we'll have to get more clarity on what does that mean that you
It's right here.
certify the fund?
So-
Because the commissioners set the funds for across the board, any taxing entity, they set that. So every year that the commissioners choose to allocate X amount of dollars to San Juan Counseling, you don't get that decision. It's the commissioners that make the decision when they adopt the final budget. But we'll have to look at
Yeah.
what does that mean, certified, that you're certifying those claims or demands. I mean, you do oversee your own fund other than San Juan Counseling's in your budgets. But I don't know what does that mean, certify that? Is there a document that you've ever been asked to sign by the state that's
I mean, my understanding, if we were to be audited by the state, they'd want to ensure that we have this restricted account. It's like when we were talking with the Social Services Appropriations Subcommittee. It's like knowing how much is available for public health helps us plan and implement our activities appropriately so we don't go over budget.
yeah.
But each year we're not sure how much is available
Even though the
because-
commissioners approve that budget.
because there's the total budget, but then there's an amount going to San Juan Counseling that we're not aware of each year.
If it's a line item in your budget, how do you not know how much is going to them?
We're shortly before the year. We can't plan anything longer than just the next year.
So you don't get a report, you don't get a report of the balance money?
So maybe it's more on the training aspect that we've got to look at. So here in June, we will certify our tax rates, which will tell you how much we're getting in your taxing entity. And then in January or November, when the commissioners approve the budget, is when you will know exactly how much is going to be transferred to San Juan Counseling with the adoption of the budget. And so that you'll have the heads up in December
Right.
when
For
the
1 year
budget's
at the
approved.
meeting.
Correct.
And then another just comment that something that we've talked about is, with like getting the community to understand that the health fund is not necessarily just for public health. I don't know if there's a way to put that in somehow in the tax, like saying that it's both public health and.
Yeah, maybe the name could change then. Because
Of the
the other
taxing.
counties that have this combination that I'm aware of, they actually have a merger between behavioral health and public health, such as Bear River.
Yeah,
That
so
they're
it's merged
combined.
together.
Yep.
Mhm.
And in
I
our
agree.
case, we're not, and so that's where.
That might just
Yeah.
be like language on the actual.
Okay.
what we're
We can
taxing,
work with the
what we're
tax
doing.
commission to
Mhm.
see if we can make that clearer on the taxing entity language. It would be in the adoption of the actual certified or the creation of the taxing entity and the tax rate.
Yep.
They would have had that in the adoption of the language. Anytime we've increased taxes, it's also been known through that truth and taxation process that San Juan Counseling is a part of it. A couple of, 3-4 years ago, when we went to do a tax increase, they were also in here as part of that taxing entity asking for that increase. And so it's there, but I can see what you're saying is let's maybe work with the tax commission to get that a little bit closer, and then we can check with the state. What does that mean to certify?
We can revisit it and just kind of figure out the best way to help you.
I think it's a sense of accountability so that I'm ultimately accountable for my fund when it comes to if I go over budget, things like that.
Yeah.
So that's what happens here, in 2019. Granted, I wasn't here for this one, but just saying, I think there was a disconnect here where it's like, oh, maybe just not being on the same page. I'm not sure, right? This is conjecture. But ultimately, there was a negative balance. The amount San Juan Counseling withdrew from requested was higher than the health fund overall. And so that left a negative amount available for public health.
So
Mac, it raises the question, I've been getting those requests and I've been processing them as part of the accounting department. And maybe they should be routed towards you or to Mac to have you look at it. Because it does appear that it's consuming most of the money that they've received from the county. So I have been kind of trained as an accountant. I just keep moving paperwork along.
okay.
So maybe I need to route them back. And
Yeah,
not
let's
that
take
I
a look
necessarily
at 'em.
approve it, just
Right.
an awareness at least, like, oh, this is happening, so that way I can plan for my budget. Say, oh, this is coming out of the health fund.
Has there ever been a
At least
discussion
that.
of the breakdown of the public health?
Not that
tax
I'm aware of.
Assessment monies like 50-50, 60-40, 70-30?
Yes, there has. Every time we approve the budget, we go through that during their budget presentations. It's presented by both Tammy and Grant on their asks, and then the final adoption of the budget is also in there. And when we go through each fund, we touch on that as well during those. But
But as
that's
far as
just
percentage,
setting
that's
the
not,
dollar. That's not accounting for the annual expenditures throughout. That's just setting 50,000 goes to these guys, 100,000 goes to these guys, and so it doesn't
it's not a percentage.
pass that part.
From what I've seen, it's San Juan Counseling has an ask, and and we go along. I mean, as far as from my side, like I don't want to say they don't need their money, right? It's like I'm all supportive of them, but just we're not aware of how much that's going to be every year.
Okay, yeah, that's
So-
weird.
And
Because the
don't
line item is the line item.
Don't they operate like a business? where-
It varies every year, as you can see.
Yeah, it will.
And so we just
Yeah.
we're always crossing our fingers, like, okay, I hope they have enough. Where
Yeah.
like it's tricky, right? Hey, I want them to
It
have
is
their
a
funding,
balance.
right?
Yep.
But
Yeah, I
also,
understand
we're
that.
so dependent on that. We're like waiting.
So we do know, like you said, in December, what we're gonna get for that year.
The year.
But that's
Well,
after our budget review process.
Then we make plans, trying to be more long-term with our plans. We
Mhm.
can't, because we don't know what the next year's gonna be.
Correct. And there's the same thing. What they look at is that federal match, the Medicaid match. And so if they don't receive Medicaid funds for specific programs, then that amount that the county has to contribute is less, which means those years you would have more dollars in the public health fund that aren't transferred to mental health.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, I can understand tricky
Yeah,
balance, hard to
thanks.
project, but yet the overall tax, that's easy to project.
Overall tax. Okay. Just how much San Juan Counseling is going to request.
No,
we
how
don't
much the
know.
overall tax is going to collect.
This total on the left here.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Right, I agree. It's just this middle part we don't know.
Yes. Yep.
But there is a paradigm shift, maybe kind of using that word match, right? So the county contributions were assessed by the state on a per capita basis. And you can see here San Juan Health, this was in, sorry about the titles here. This was estimated. Please focus on that. This changed eventually, right? So this is just part of the history of last year. We had the lowest per capita investment in public health, local public health, when you look across the counties and health districts. And what had also happened, oh, sorry.
Yeah. So after that reallocation, what is that number?
So what had also happened was the state was increasing their contribution to local public health. And so previously they had provided about 107,000, increased to about 164. And so this is, sorry, when I say proposed, this was the previous amount, right? And so as we worked with the state, the ask was that we match their contribution. They don't technically use that word, but effectively match. Sharing some of the impact here, it has helped us reduce our administrative rate from around 30% to 21%. We're investing in this community health needs assessment process to help us tailor our approach. And then now as we're implementing this increase for our county, we're further reducing the admin rate so that more of those state and federal contracts are used for their own activities and they're more tailored. So that's that impact there that we're anticipating throughout this year. For the expanded use of county public health funds, long-term, here's some of our proposed use of it. So here's the state, breaking, like I said, down between admin rate, EPI, community health needs assessment, but then for the county increase, like I said, contributing to the administrative costs, but then also helping with some of our leadership. Those core positions, like I said originally, were meant to have local funds available to support those full-time positions. So that's our proposed use there, as well as some funding for staff coordination. So as we've seen it rolled out, like you said, Mac, I broke it down into 6-month increments here because of that misalignment of the state's fiscal year and ours. So this is a little bit rough because I just divided our fiscal year funds into 2. So it's 6 months and 6 months, trying to show like, okay, how are we doing 6 months at a time? I'm not an accountant, so I don't know if this is the right way to do it. But you can see previously we had this lower amount, then the state increased theirs, and so there ended up being this difference here for 6 months, and then we got realigned in the first half of this year so that we're more in alignment with a little extra from our side. And when I say difference, this is the county higher than the state. And then moving forward, anticipating that to be just right in line so that there's no difference between state and local. There was talk about a request about back pay. Representative Daley Provost had mentioned that, and so this is a chance we just wanted to double check, make sure we're on the same page with that when it comes to this negative 50,000. And there's different ways maybe to look at this. For example, that deficit from years ago when the health department was first organized, maybe that's something we can explore in terms of reporting on this so-called back pay. So that's something I wanted to touch base on there.
So with the back pay, I think one of the things to also consider is the general fund has never charged you for IT or HR. And so there's things like that I think we also, as a finance manager, you would definitely want to make sure that those costs are allocated appropriately across the funds so that we're telling the whole entire story.
Oh, sorry. I had tried to edit. I had meant to put that line in here. So looking at how do we sustain this? So one part of that is quantifying, like you said, the in-kind contributions. Currently, we part of our admin rate has maintenance,
IT and HR.
has, what was the other, sorry. Oh, there it is, custodial.
Custodial.
Currently, we do transfer funds for those, but HR and IT,
You had
IT we
mentioned-
had discussed, right?
Yeah, you
I don't know
mentioned
that we
both of
implemented
those.
it.
Yeah, as an opportunity in the future, especially as we've run into some critical problems with both of those fields, is trying to see how to be more equitable across the funds.
Yeah.
And not just your road department,
Oh, totally.
library, kind of
Right.
all those.
And we
as
did
well.
see a shift where I think we just need to implement IT where we help pay for IT.
Correct.
We did see like, we saw like the previous time I saw trade maybe twice, but now we're seeing much more response this whole calendar year. So I attribute that to that discussion we had to
Yes.
say, oh, how can we be more equitable?
Yep.
Not to take over.
No, that's
Not our
exactly.
intent,
It's
right?
just
But
being
just
equitable.
enough, right? Enough.
Yeah.
And then part of it, we do have our own funds that are available to help with HR needs. So it's that interesting balance of like, okay, some of it, it's the county is just basic infrastructure that's helping us exist. And then sometimes we have funding that can help pay for HR, which is the case with our crisis public health task force money, workforce money, and like I said, that infrastructure funding. Those are available to help bolster and help us be ready to hire folks, et cetera, et cetera. So that's a side note. The main issue here, though, is that sustainability. This is me as a newcomer to the county, listening and working with our team to say, what are our options to sustain local public health funding as a county that would, one, allow us to be that locally tailored. Some challenges I've heard when we were part of Southeast was like we were one of many counties in Southeast Health Department, and it was harder for us to get that tailored approach that addressed our community's needs. So now we're here, we're local, and now it's just like, okay, how do we sustain it? And so I listed a few here. I'm not even sure if all of them are viable, but
Yeah, I was gonna have a question if when we apply for some of this assistance, are we competing with the Navajo health system? I wonder if some of those funds will go into, I don't know how they operate, what funds that they used to operate.
Mhm.
They're looking about the Navajo Trust Fund, the Navajo Rehabilitation Fund. With that, since it come from, but we do have a Navajo population that probably is, I don't know if everybody is served by Navajo.
nation, right?
It's just,
As well
I
as
just have a thought. It's not, I don't question your list. I thought if we would be competing for the same dollar.
right. So
And, and it's good. I mean, sometimes you never know what's available. Doesn't hurt to try.
and something we've been working together as a board is to strategize like, okay, jurisdiction is part of the landscape, right? Navajo Nation, Ute Mountain Ute and Paiute being sovereign nations, and so respecting that, but then also recognizing, disease doesn't care about jurisdiction. So how do we work together to say, okay, how can we be more of a team? And that, to reach that level takes a lot of work, but it's some memorandums of agreement, some intergovernmental agreements maybe to say, okay, how do we at least communicate? Can we work towards collaborating, maybe even integrating, things like that? So
How do you look at the, and this is truly, I don't know, is when you look at the overall picture, and I go back to that per capita spend, your UNHS is such a huge partner
yes,
in this county, and per capita spend should also include their spend in public health because they're also out doing the same thing that you're doing, or public health is doing. They're public health educators. They're also coordinating immunizations. They're a system that I go to specifically because I have family that works there. And so that dentistry is pretty awesome for my kids. So UNHS is a big part of the county. I noticed they have an event coming up here in Monticello for public health and kind of their marketing efforts as well. And then you also have IHS that is down south participating in there. And so the public, I think somehow, how do we get that message out that the public health spend is actually more than just San Juan County's public health spend, because there's UNHS's spend, there's IHS's spend. And so to me, I think public health efforts across the county are a lot higher than what we're championing.
Good.
That
good.
makes sense?
No, I appreciate the comment. One way to look at it is back on that earlier slide around different types of prevention. And IHS and portions of UNHS are on that later level. They're not as much upstream. You mentioned some that are upstream.
Yeah.
That's where UNH is a little unique, because a lot of healthcare systems, they just don't, they're not driven by prevention. They're more what we sometimes call sick care. It's like someone's sick, so we care for them. So UNH is a little unique. One thing I'm seeing too is across the state, no other county is counting their tribal healthcare organization funding in those dollars.
Okay.
And so that would be, in terms of equity, it would be appropriate to say, if we're going to count it, we expect other people to, hey, quantify that. How's
Yeah.
it going for your, is it Northern Ute? Is it Paiute in the Cedar area, right? So that, yeah, I'd like to explore that, because they are strong partners, similar to, like, Intermountain does do more public health work than most health organizations, for example. But they're not counted in any of the state.
Interesting. Yeah.
So, just trying to navigate that, because I agree, we need to paint a complete picture.
I was just going to mention that with Indian Health Services, UNHS only contract health dollars, which is, they used to call it contract health. They're now called purchase referred care funds. And I think if Grant and his department were to explore agreements, you can probably put language in there that says their services they provide should be counted as
To the state.
to be a credit. And then it also allows the county to step in to clarify the issue on duplication of resources,
Yeah.
because then any organization that operates and utilizes federal dollars on the reservation where we're also delivering services, they would define what services, where the services are focused on, and what population, and then the county would come in and identify those that are left out, the gaps,
Yeah.
and say these are the numbers we have, and work that. I think, and the state loves seeing those agreements when the county and the tribes work together.
Yeah.
And it's a huge plus. So
The cooperating.
yeah, so if these guys can really, it'll take some meetings with IHS, with UNHS, but it's possible.
With Toyok as well.
Yeah, and Toyok. So.
Yeah.
But that's something I think is worth exploring. I think one huge piece would be, where can we find a template to follow through on getting the language we need, so that piece of, well, here's the organization and the county's collaborating with them. This is the services that also needs to be considered as credit, So that's my 5 cents.
I like that. Yeah.
And
That makes
sometimes
sense.
it gives them a choice when I can, sometimes maybe a family conflict within the service area they're allocated. But if they can have a choice for instant counseling,
Yep.
which is not under your department, it's under the umbrella, I guess, or any other things, it's also, beside what Commissioner Harvey said, it's another benefit for people to have a choice in case
So there's options.
options.
Yeah, and that's something we've discussed with some recent meetings with White Mesa. Yeah, because there is Toyok WIC based in Toyok. There is in Kayenta, and places and Shiprock.
And
Oh, really?
one other thing is they need transportation for that sometimes. And so it can be other things that can be under the options is that sometimes they don't have somebody to drive them there
Right.
or the cost of gasoline. I mean,
Yeah.
it can be other things like that included under the options.
So I'm not sure if let's see, it sounds like we've discussed maybe the tribal matches or any others. Again, I'm not sure if this list is entirely helpful, but is there anything else that is worth considering to sustain the fund?
I think that, the Navajo Trust Fund be something that can be looked at. Also, the Navajo Rehabilitation Fund can be a possibility there too. I mean, we also in that commission, in that board. And so, anyway,
That'd be great. So we'll explore
those
those
things
together. Yeah.
worthwhile exploring.
Okay. Mac, what was the timeline on the ARPA funds? Because that's the current approach for now with the.
So go back to your
increase.
slide of how much the county contributed. So the
Do you want
164,000.
the total, right? That one, yeah.
Yeah. So this year we used ARPA funds 164,330. Those funds expire in 2024.
Okay.
So I have 2024 that I can supplement that fund for. After 2024, we would be taking from general funds 164 plus $1,000
Or at
out of
least-
general funds. We would not have those ARPA funds to inject into public health, and
I
so
guess some
Yeah,
difference
yeah.
between these two, right?
It ended up being 114 because
Okay.
that's included with the tax also. The tax that we get.
okay,
Yeah.
the 50,000.
Yeah, approximately.
So
depending
you're
on how
60.
much San Juan
So
Council-
that's the 62. So you're looking at 115.
Right.
Okay.
Ish.
Okay. Yeah. So, but that also, is this number before the market adjustments for administrative costs? I think so.
What's that?
So when we approached the state legislature, that was before we gave the raises.
Oh.
Right. But the way that our reimbursements work,
Uh-huh.
we're not really, because we're cost reimbursed, so we're not really impacted by the increase.
Okay. So you
So
think
this increase
115
our-
is that?
How much we can spend on the grants, but
Okay.
other than actual funding,
Okay.
we're not really.
So what I think is still, it's the same is, you heard from, our clerk auditor last commission meeting, how we are not collecting as much as we had in centrally assessed on our property taxes. That's going to go down and hit general fund. Yet you have these newer taxing entities that we also have to contribute to. San Juan Counseling is part of that mix in there, obviously, as was mentioned. And so you will, after next year, taking more out of your general funds, unless, and that's, I appreciate Grant's efforts here, is, there's potential alternatives. When you look at the overnight tax, that's a TRT tax, and so I don't know how those type of things would work to create sustainability in this fund. The Utah Navajo Trust Fund and Navajo Revitalization Funds have primarily been used for housing at the chapters, and so I don't know, all of a sudden we're taking public health out of these funds that were set aside for different purposes.
Yeah.
Yet IHS and UNHS doesn't have access to those, and so, but I don't know. I appreciate the look, and I think part of it that is not on here is also the reduction of expenses. Is if you're meeting the minimum standards, well, what does that truly mean? You presented that as well. Are we grant rich, like you had mentioned? Sometimes you go out and you get these grants and your revenue is high and your expenses are high because we've taken on those. There's been, that community concern is, are we a runaway train here and just building an empire, but really not effective? And how is it kind of like you made sure, and you had pointed that out as well as the effectiveness in your statistics. Are we reducing obesity, tobacco cessation? And so it's making sure you were focused on the funds to where we're effective in all measures. When you talk about WIC, that continues to be, I appreciate it on your goal that you're looking at this next year and you'll analyze it in 6 months to have more WIC in the county. That's something that in the surveys, staff has mentioned to me that is coming out that the people want more WIC services. We have 2 mobile units. And so the likelihood of WIC being here tomorrow should be pretty easy, to where you could have WIC in LaSalle and Spanish Valley, some of our lower income areas, along with Monticello, Blanding, and then down through the chapters. But if the chapters are doing WIC, we don't want to step on their toes necessarily. If Monument Valley has UNHS there and they're doing WIC services, then I wonder.
That's Kayenta.
Kayenta, okay. And then
But
what?
if I might clarify, as we expand WIC outreach, it will cost a lot more, because that will require our nurses to be full-time focused on that. Right now, it's in-house, and they're able to multitask. If people don't come in for WIC, they do a lot of other things and charge their money to those accounts. So
is it realigning your revenues and expenses to those to meet the needs of what the people are asking?
That's where we're asking for this sustained funding so that we can do that. Right now, we use up all of WIC funds every year as we are right now, just in Blanding. But the cost to travel and dedicate a full day or at least a half day, that's we have to figure that out. Is it a half day or full day to another location? That's that dedicated time as well as travel. Similar to how Ronnie, environmental health costs quite a bit because there's so much travel involved.
I see that. Okay.
Yeah. And so that's something this is where, this
Well,
is
we
really
go back to your expenses, Grant, and 36% of your total budget is being spent on WIC right now. WIC
nursing and WIC. So the home visiting, disease investigation, things like that.
But I think there's a need for WIC to be present in other communities other than Blanding, is what I'm trying to say.
Oh, I agree. Yeah, I'm not disagreeing. It's just that cost. So trying to be realistic and figure out a plan to do that and sustain it. And this is why we're having this discussion right now.
It's a challenge.
Yep.
But I think this is worthwhile for you to go look for different funds that may be more than just 1 year or 2 years,
One comparison too is that Southeast had a relatively consistent revenue stream for public health, and if you compare it to us, every year we're not sure exactly how much. And so if we shift to the new model, we'll know how much, and so we can plan and say, okay, this much is going to help us improve our outreach. Along those same lines, we are trying to tailor our hours to meet community need. We've been tracking the use of our access of our resources on Fridays, and we have a log, and there's just very few people that come in or call in on Fridays. And that's we see that in our partners in our building, San Juan Counseling. They're open for half a day on Fridays, but extended hours throughout the rest of the week. And so we propose this as a way to also tailor what we're doing there in the building. Granted, at the bottom here, available 24/7 for emergencies, disease outbreaks, etc. But in terms of being in the building, that being the case. And what we're also seeing is we're also out in the community a lot, and sometimes that takes more time on a different day. And so Friday ends up being that day to don't go overtime, right? And so the office ends up being very quiet because of that. We're trying to avoid overtime. So this would be one proposed change as well to better meet community needs Monday through Thursday, and that low demand, almost zero demand on Fridays.
So if you had WIC service at a mobile unit on Friday, where you're actually out in the community, that it'd be more received?
I don't know about Fridays for that.
That's when you get the paycheck. That's when your moms get your
out.
paycheck, and you've got to go to the grocery store. And now you have your WIC vouchers. Kind of
Could be.
coincides
Yeah,
with
we
that
could
Friday
this.
check.
Yeah, in a different community, you're saying, right? Maybe.
Yeah,
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 because it's true.
throughout the
We
county.
only have 12 staff members, so to go somewhere else, it does. We want to make sure we have enough capacity in the building for those normal hours. Yeah, so that could be a way to handle it. Is true. It could help us.
It's
We've
a
also
challenge.
talked with when are food banks happening, for example, because that's the overlapping target population.
Mm-hmm.
So for example, here when food bank is happening, could we also have our van just next door,
Mhm.
as it were, in the parking lot?
Yeah.
And we can use the Wi-Fi here, for example. That's a core thing that we need. So yeah, those types of ideas I think would really help us, again, better meet community needs. So this would be one other ask as I wrap up.
Okay, is that all of your presentation or you got more?
That's it. I had a wrap-up slide about just saying
Any
thank
questions,
you and
comments?
I just have a comment. The last training that I went to for commissioners, they had a presentation by a doctor. And it was a survey done about mental health or just regular health. And they have what benefit, and they did the survey, and they have exercise, eating right. I mean, all the things that we've been taught about the help with health.
Yeah.
And they had a certain percentage how this help. And you know what was the highest category? I never thought. Socializing. And I think especially with the COVID and the
like
way
isolation, right?
isolation.
Yeah, exactly.
So, I just want to kind of pass that along
Right.
because I'm sure probably you're familiar with that, but to me it was a surprise. That probably sometimes we don't take that into account,
Right.
especially as we are so busy and we just keep going and avoiding each other, because we're
Yeah.
too busy.
Yeah,
But
it's, like I said, during the pandemic, I talked about the 3 early birds, and
Yeah.
the first being early prevention.
yeah,
And every time I was on the radio or wherever someone would listen, I
Yeah.
would say stress management
yeah,
is also part of that, so
Yeah.
that we can make healthy decisions. And being isolated is part of those things. One of those things that contributes to that, makes it worse. So if I might add one clarification, Max, sorry to go over a little bit, but our current issue is we need that foundation of funds so that we can meet those needs of our current grants. So I don't see it as a runaway train right now, as long as we have that foundation. We can actually acquire, we have, like I said, more potential funding that can come to our health department, as long as we have that foundation so that we can assess opportunities, make sure we have capacity, and move from there. Because it's not so much the amount of grants that's causing our admin rate to be high. It's just we're trying to exist as a health department,
Oh,
actually,
yeah.
just the minimum
Yeah.
performance. So,
yeah.
so thanks for all the leadership and coordination and support. So, here's the mouse.
Okay, thanks for that, Grant. And I think need a couple of minutes to get ready
Yeah.
to go into
Good job,
commission
Ronnie.
meeting, or-
Appreciate your comments. Yeah, we will need a couple of
And
seconds
your comment.
Oh,
to
yeah.
switch over. Yeah, no, we
Glad
appreciate
Ronnie
this
was
stuff.
here.
Yeah, and Tyler.